Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and welcome to this Future Friday. Now, for those who do not know, Future Friday is relatively reserved for talking about science fiction role-playing game for tabletop role-playing game enthusiasts, specifically targeting transhuman tabletop RPGs such as GURPS Transhuman, Eclipse Phase, Altered Carbon, and those kind of thematic games that deal with transhuman technology and changes in culture. And today on Future Friday, you will see the title of this show is called Caldera. And that is because thematically, this show takes place Monday through Friday. So Monday through Thursday, we did talk about such things. And it lends itself today to talking about the exact same subject and expanding the parameters for our tabletop RPG themes. So I thought I would talk about it for our transhuman games. So what exactly does a caldera have anything to do with, like, you know, getting your cortical stack and spinning it up and re-sleeving into some other biological or synthetic body and, toting a railgun around in the greater known universe? Well, actually, it has a lot to do with it. Considering the fact that despite Earth having a caldera on it, the idea of a volcano, a rather subdued volcano, enough so that a lake of some sort, some kind of aquatic element, could be fill up its basin. The same could be, and probably is true, for not only a number of icy moons somewhere out in our own solar system, but also the fact that if you leave our solar system, such exotic places may exist out there. So I thought we would talk about it on that level. Basically, great locations to have your adventures and why in the world you would have them, and to not let us forget that having adventures in exotic locations are just as important as the stories themselves. So, all right, let's get into some very simple reasons, some descriptions of calderas, reasons why we use them, and then we get into some nitty gritty. All right, so caldera. Earlier this week, talked about the elemental aspects of them, far more fantasy, but anyway, calderas represent a lot of your earth traits, climbing skills, geology, lots of crevices and possible crumbling earth and that kind of things, whether you're scaling the outside skin. Maybe more often than not, some of your calderas won't be volcanically created, but from meteor impacts. We can look at the topography of Mars and our own moon to give us some ideas of what an impact crater would look like, having it filled with some kind of fluid, frozen or not, frozen, any state between frozen and boiling. Seems like a pretty cool exotic location. All right, so we have our earth element, then we have our air element, and if we take a look at our air element, of course, one extreme of the air element is to not have air at all. So in a vacuum or nearly airless location, you may have a location where in your picking one of your exotic locations to have an adventure, it might be an airless void. It may even be so, despite the fact that wherever this is taking place, whether it is an exoplanet on the outskirts of a gate crashing location, or anything thereof, right? So, for example, Mars, as an example, has a Olympus Mons, a mountain so tall that it's possible that even if Mars was terraformed and had a limited amount of breathable oxygen, or at least we had air breathers on where we could breathe it, the mountain might be so tall that its peak is still airless void, or maybe the air may even settle down to the point where the top is an airless void. So a caldera may have the exact same traits where the upper reaches may poke through the level at which air is breathable. All right. So, but we don't have to have a vacuum. There may be, a caldera could very easily be on a planet that has such toxic gases that we wouldn't be able to breathe it in the first place. Could a caldera exist on a place like Titan, where methane and ethane gases exist, and other sulfuric acids? I suppose if you were if you're feeling rather morbid and or sacrificial, maybe you want to become a martyr. I suppose you could walk on the surface of Venus. But if there's technology enough to even walk on the surfaces of, say, Venus or Mercury or something like that, there might be, sulfuric gases and acids and things in the very atmosphere, much of which may coalesce into pools of molten or acidic, or heck, maybe even bases or something like that, scientifically speaking, inside the basin of the impact crater or the volcano, creating what would ostensibly be a re-flavored or redefined caldera. Now, for our fire element, let's call it a thermal element. For fire, we can have ourselves the equivalent of, well, lava, a real volcano. We have them here on Earth. Earth still counts, especially if you are following along the timeline of eclipse phase. Who's to say that a caldera on what basically is a blasted, twisted landscape that is the remnants of Earth isn't today now a safe haven for humanity that still exists on Earth, if it still exists in your setting? So maybe some of the most dangerous and locations on Earth in present day become the safe havens for the future. So it's also a possibility that maybe even the war that took place in the background of eclipse phase created more calderas through blasting the Earth itself by affecting the very mantle of the Earth and causing some geological accidents to happen, so that maybe the Earth has started to shift and change. I'm not sure how far you have decided that your setting has gone, but that may be a possibility as well. Including the fact that maybe one or more of those impact craters may have come from, say, I don't know, like a tungsten steel rod, or a couple of dozen launched down on Earth from some like orbital habitat, impacting the planet so devastatingly that through the acid rains of, like, I don't know, nanotech pools or something, that further calderas were created from like a corporate war or governmental war or something like that, as well, or the combat with the Titans, or maybe people driven insane and launched said steel rods down into the Earth, driven insane by the exigent virus. So or who's to say that even in the altered carbon universe, that at some point in the past, maybe even recent past, that some corporate power or something eliminated a governmental threat by launching just a single tungsten rod down into the planet, into some major city around the world, and turned it into its own impact crater, now filled with sludge or acid or the remnants of a collapsed society, and the threat that corporations hold over the other governments, making them fall or whatnot. And now it becomes more cyberpunk noir. Now, so we've also, in terms of the fire element, we do have volcanic activity, lava spewing forth, and of course the gases and the heat from steam and such coming out of it. But if we move more towards thermal, there are moons, icy moons, that we have in our own solar system that are cryo volcanic, that have a cryovolcanic activity, literally spewing out frozen liquid that is of a state that is colder than anything that could survive on Earth. And as pressure changes, the state at which something is a solid, liquid, and or gas starts to shift and change as well. So you can have fluids that are, you know, liquid nitrogen and even colder out there in the universe. And so you could have liquid frozen volcanoes spewing forth this material. And maybe if they're far more dormant, through some kind of process, maybe that frozen liquid may freeze on its surface unless given some kind of like force or pressure or something like that. Maybe something as major as a starship landing, maybe something as sensitive as a single humanoid stepping on its surface that causes it to crack and spew forth that frozen liquid. So we do have our earth, air, we do have our thermal or fire element, and of course we go towards our water element. And our aquatic element, again, could be something where it's, you know, pure, clean, pristine water. Maybe there is maybe some left on Earth. If you've gone through an exoplanet, you can reframe and reskin any of these things to match the exoticness of an exoplanet. Maybe even that fluid could be very acidic or poisonous. Again, talking about ethane or methane or alcohol or sulfuric acid, liquid carbon monoxide or dioxide or something. I don't know. I can't pull those chemical compounds off the top of my head, whether they would be liquid. I suppose you could have a liquid, an entire lake of liquid mercury, I suppose, and as well as many other things that might be extremely volatile if exposed to the proper, given the proper conditions. And with the idea of having Pandora gates in the with the thank you there, Rickard. The idea of the Pandora gates, having access to Pandora gates exists in the Eclipse phase universe, and just maybe or maybe not you do or do not include them in your setting. If you do include them, great way to have something exotic. Now, for those who don't know, this show is TriCast over three platforms: Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord server. So if you would like to participate in the show with one or multiple of them, you may do so with full audio and video, and you can participate through the chat. Now, Rickard posted a pic in the Discord server, which was something that I was going to get around and get to, is playing around with the idea of a caldera is the opposite effect, where we love ourselves the idea of crater cities, right? A crater city basically is a space habitat where half the work is already done for us. All we need to do is put a dome over. All we need to. How difficult that is. Anyway, all we need to do is dome it over, or at least, if the crater walls are tall enough to allow us to fill the inside, either artificially, that this came about through some random means, or purposefully fill the inside with breathable air and oxygen, or at least a breathable air source that the people that live in there can breathe, then the inner portion could be the habitat, and then the outer portion is completely toxic with barren landscape, acidic minerals, that kind of thing, or heck, even boiling oceans or something. So the inside could be the place where you live, complete with according to this image, complete with cloud masses and greenery, whether it's something as simple as base algae or moss, or it could be grass and plains, and we've got clouds and cities and rivers and things of that nature. So location to me is quite important. I do talk about it, considering that I am the self-appointed third pillars of the tabletop RPG community, and I'm waiting to be kicked off of my throne. The idea behind it would be finding a great exotic location to have your stories take place, and to not forget that despite the fact that player characters are walking around in their combat morphs and railguns, to have these things take place in exotic locations. So, yeah, Tesla Ranger, what's going on there, dude? Um, Oh yeah, Rickard says the source for that image was from Cowboy Bebop, and yeah, Cowboy Bebop is actually a great source for exploring our solar system for locations. Let's Tesla Ranger says looking into a volcano, looking into an Io volcano. What would it look like to peer into one of the volcanoes currently active on Jupiter's moon, Io? The caldera of, I'm going to butcher this, Tupan Patera, or Tupan Patera, named after a Brazilian thunder god, reveals itself to be a strange and dangerous place replete with hot black lava, warm red sulfur deposits, likely deposited from vented gas, and hilly yellow terrain, also high in sulfur. Ooh, that would smell. The robot spacecraft Galileo, currently orbiting Jupiter, provided the above vista late last year when it swooped by the active world. Tapan Patera is actually a volcanic depression surrounded by cliffs nearly a kilometer high. The width of the depression is about 75 kilometers. That is huge. That's a world unto itself. So, yeah, there's no. Sometimes fact is stranger than fiction, and the idea that you have a 75 kilometer width depression in this pretty toxic place filled with sulfurous locations. And Tesla puts in that it's swooped by in 2001, so there might be some changes on Io. But again, why would we have? I mean, why bother using that for tabletop games? Like, why an exotic location like this? Well, first of all, we do want to throw some. We should be throwing curveballs at our players. Dead Man puts in an image of such a place, and it isn't a perfect circle, which is another great idea, that it doesn't necessarily need to be a perfect circle, and some of that mass might be, and I'm probably picking at it wrong, that it looks like it's basically subdivided into three major locations, and that's just Io. So one reason to throw a curveball at your players is that you really want to have in your back pocket the ability as a game master to reinforce the dangers in your world, to keep your players moving forward, and not that have them pause too long to assess the danger. Right? And the reason for that is because you want to control the pacing in the game. And one of the great ways to, as a tool to use that as a game master to keep the things moving forward, is to constantly in the background have something that's ever changing and ever dangerous creeping up on the heels of your player characters when they stand still too long. Much like standing still, I don't know, where a pool of water is slowly creeping towards your feet and an electrical cord is stuck in the water, and you need to keep moving around and finding higher ground so you don't get electrocuted. The, the, what a strange metaphor I'm coming up with here. You want to have a set of circumstances that you can pull on and use so that at any moment you want to start electrocuting your players' feet. Now, I don't mean that literally. What I mean is you want something nipping at the heels of your players for them to always constantly look around and go, yeah, we want to make a plan, but we also need to keep moving, need to keep thinking, need to keep interacting with the world. And one of those ways of doing that is to use the environment. And the environment can do such a thing when gravity, air, heat, danger, crushing impacts, dangerous impalements, etc., can affect the player characters. And because in this transhuman world, there are, well, cortical stacks, which ostensibly makes your player characters immortal to all but the most dangerous locations. be a good GM, and every once in a while, just kill your players off. Yeah, I'm suggesting that. As a matter of fact, I'm even saying that you should probably do it at least once to get to use a bad phrase, pop a player character's cherry. Do it. Long story short, kill a couple of player characters off. Why do I suggest doing that? In Altered Carbon or Eclipse Phase or GURPS Transhuman or any of these other transhuman games, I suggest doing it because, frankly, it's actually part of the storytelling element because your players will just get spun up yet again from their cortical stack. Will they suffer some lack? A slang term used in Eclipse Phase for lacking a lack of memory, a loss of time. Sure, they might suffer some of that, but it's also to reinforce in this world, and especially for your player characters, that there's a good chance you're probably going to fail, and B, that death is enough of a commonality that this is something you really should be encountering in the game, right? Um, yeah, Rickard says, well, technically, it's more downing the character as they don't really die, right? Yeah, as placed on the front cover, or maybe the front cover of, or maybe the back cover of Byline in Eclipse Phase, it's like, death is a disease, cure it, right? So I suppose you could claim that the word death has been recontextualized, where your common person because like, yeah, I died a couple of times, but I got over it, right? So, how can we use that with our environment? Well, more for the most part, player characters really should be in the dangerous locations, and a lot of because this universe is filled with so many the ubiquitous surveillance and artificial intelligence and radio signals everywhere. It pretty much, for the most part, wherever you go, there you are, and there is everyone else watching and waiting for you to do something. For the most part, passively until your crimes are revealed. And the best places to commit crimes, and let's be honest, player characters are despite possibly working for even law enforcement agencies, black ops agencies like Firewall or something, they will be committing crimes, and so will factions in your world. And the best places for them to do it are in the most dangerous locations they can find. Why? Because no one else will be there, or have a reason to be there, or even want to be there. And so, having a meeting that's on the outer skin of an active cryovolcano, or trying to establish a Cold War beachhead by assembling a massive army of synthetic, robots or something like that in some exoplanet, so that they could come back to, the Sol system and I don't know, invade a moon on Saturn or some other kind of crap. To do that, you need to be in an exotic location so that no one else has even reason to want to visit you. And now, let's be honest, people that are crazy enough to do such a thing might actually be a little bit idiotic in their machinations, but in a larger scope, sure, maybe building a habitat on the outer skin of a cryovolcano might not be the smartest thing to do. And sure, even left to their own devices, maybe 5 years is a little too long, because at the 7-year period, it might just get swallowed up or frozen over or melted because of some kind of weird, strange acid or something. But in the scope of time we're talking about, player characters might need to go there to retrieve any number of things. The player characters need to go to bypass the quarantine zone around Earth, drop down on a busted, I don't know, elevator, dropping down to the equator on Earth just to get to a Caldera where there is a safe haven to rescue some great scientists that had at least one part of a 15-part program to counter hack, I don't know, the exurgent virus or something, or the sorry, not exurgent virus, the Titans or something like that. And the PCs need to go get the MacGuffin and get the hell out of there. And a great way to use a Caldera, which is just basically what I'm using it as a placeholder, is to have an exotic environment where, again, you have in your back pocket. You could have your Earth element where there are in the background earthquakes, tight corridors, natural caverns, um, rock collapses. There could be, mineral deposits that might be very important. Some of them might even be under a, shall we say, an unstable state. Those corridors don't need to be made out of earth either. It could be made out of solid rock ice or some kind of chemical that is currently so cold that it is in a solid state as we speak. I'm not sure exactly how you can freeze mercury, but maybe it's possible that mercury or solid carbon dioxide or solid methane is a possibility at some point. Heck, we saw an example in the movie Interstellar, where at one point their spacecraft is flying through what looks like gaseous clouds, but the very gas was actually frozen solid or something. So you could start mixing and matching some exotic locations where you do have some solid places like Swiss cheese that the players need to navigate in order to get themselves into or extricate themselves out of. And since we can play with gravity as well, and I guess gravity, you can throw that into our air element. With gravity, a place that has a very light gravity, I'm going to use 4 methods to describe gravity, although I know it's not necessarily that way. Heavy gravity, standard, light, and zero. And I understand gravity mathematically doesn't work that way, but statistically, probably in most role-playing games, we're probably going to describe it that way. So having manipulations of gravity is going to have a lot of impact when exploring your Earth element. So if the PCs need to go through some kind of caves or caverns, not too bad in standard gravity, but when it's heavy gravity and a rock falls on top of them, yeah, no, you might not want to do that. Tesla Ranger says Mercury has a freezing point of minus 38.83 degrees Celsius or minus 37.89 degrees Fahrenheit. So, wow. Every known element in our periodic table actually has a freezing point. I'm pretty sure. And of course, we have various. I don't know. I could not name the number of compounds that probably exist out there in a stellar format that come in all kinds of states. Solid, liquid, gas, plasma, etc. So even in our Earth element, whether it's light gravity and the PCs can jump, 5 times as far as they normally can, or even survive a fall of such a distance in open caverns and such. And in a zero gravity environment, you do have the fact that they need to navigate a hive of sorts, more again like Swiss cheese or an anthill, more than navigating standard caverns in normal gravity, which might be pretty important, especially if the PCs are using weapons that have recoil to them and having them bounce around, or even caverns filled with going to our air element, whether they're like literal wind tunnels carved into such a place. I could imagine, say, Europa's basically having a dense core filled with an aquatic ocean larger than our own, and then capping that off with a thick icy coating on the outside, much like a chocolate truffle, very large and cold. And so having a frozen caldera there is pretty important. And then, of course, there may even be man-made tunnels laced in and out and throughout Europa's icy icy skin that the player characters need to navigate around. Rickard says for hot black ice, uh, super ionic water. Super ionic water, also called super ionic ice, or I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what number that is a phase of water that exists at extremely high temperature and pressures. In super ionic water, water molecules break apart and oxygen ions crystallize into an evenly spaced lattice while the hydrogen ions float. Yeah, water, possibly the weirdest molecule in the universe. 18. Not sure what that refers to there, Dead Man. Please give me context, and I will elaborate. Um, so, oh, thank you, Dead Man. Wow, my mind just gets lost there. Yeah, Roman numeral 18. Thank you very much, there, sir. Uh, anyway, God, I'm stupid. Um, the our air element with our Caldera and having some actions with our um oh, Rickard says there are 18 configurations of ice, this being number 18. I didn't know that. Ooh, damn, you could just play with. So if there's 18 different configurations of ice, you could play with 18 different elemental forces as if you want to write this very large for an environment for no other reason than having 18 different cultivating 18 different environments for your PCs to go into. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, like Rick says, as said, water is weird. That's awesome. I like that. And as we know, scientists tend to say that water is one of the things that brings life. So what a great way to introduce some xenomorphic life into your world. Not literally the xenomorphs from Alien, but I'm saying an alien species or something into your world. So using our using our air element, wind tunnels, storms. Heck, who knows what kind of thunderstorms would happen in an atmosphere uh, floating over a caldera that's made up of poisonous gases. Like, are there what kind of thunderstorms are happening in the gaseous regions of Neptune or Jupiter or Saturn or heck even Venus? And if they are there actual electrical storms happening there? Do do they really rain in these clouds like it would something on Earth? And if sulfuric acid rain, would you really want to stand under something like that? Heck no. But the reason being for that is that, again, Earth collapse, tight locations, navigating a Swiss cheese environment, crossing massive crevices, watching out for razor sharp uh, elements of like glass or obsidian that might rip apart a spacesuit, having a thin membrane protecting the player characters from near death outside of them. Um, you're fine, Rickard. Having this dangerous element, of course, when we get into our air, the fact that acid rain or some kind of biological materials floating in the atmosphere or super high winds. As a matter of fact, and I know I'm mixing real life science here, but the storms, let's say on Mars or Jupiter, are are in magnitudes stronger than any windstorms happening here on Earth. Now they are mitigated by less gravity and air pressures, but you know, the fact that there are storms that rage for years that cover spaces larger than, say, our own continents on Earth, or heck, even on Jupiter, um, a red storm that's happening on Jupiter larger than our own planet, and having winds that are in magnitude stronger than Earth, and a PC happens to have an encounter in such a place, pretty dangerous, especially if a PC can get lifted up and blown with such winds that, oh yeah, by the way, you're standing in winds that are Mach 7. So yeah, if you let go, you're probably going to be splattered in the jelly inside of your spacesuit. Might give a player character pause when they're trying to have a railgun fight with some enemies on the other side of a ridge. Now, air, we also talked about the fact that you can have thin air or a lack of air. So, for example, again, spacesuits protecting PCs, maybe the thin air, they can survive for very short periods of time until something cakes some kind of not something smaller than dust. I believe Mars has something known as, they don't even call it dust. It's so small they call it fines because it's like on a micron level. And so maybe that kind of crap might collect inside of biological lungs or even filtration systems inside of synthmorphs when you're on some kind of alien world or some planetary surface, like say, I don't know, Mars itself, and you're going after some kind of big bad or MacGuffin or whatever it is, and you start breathing that crap into your lungs. Who knows how long it would take before that stuff cakes in and kills you? Thank you, Dead Man. Jupiter's a great red spot. The Great Red Spot, what a boring name. Anyway, the Great Red Spot is a persistent high-pressure region in the atmosphere of Jupiter, producing an anticyclonic storm, the largest in the solar system, 22 degrees south of Jupiter's equator. It has been continuously observed since 1830. Earlier observations from, and then it goes on, earlier observations from 1665 to 1713, and it goes on there from Wikipedia. Yeah, an eternal storm, and I mean, could you claim that there are space pirates orbiting or inhabiting such a region in Jupiter's atmosphere to keep away from law enforcement, or some kind of interstellar law enforcement? I'd play with that. I couldn't tell you what kind of technology it would take to survive in and around such a storm, or whether that storm, there is some kind of chemical reaction happening in that storm that's important for, say, gas mining or something. I don't know. But in your setting, could you rationalize something like that? Yeah, and there's a lot of anecdotal science out there that where you could rationalize why people would be involved in such a thing, if for no other reason than to be scientists as well. Yeah. Rickard says, I see your massive storm, and I will grade you with a hexagonal one. That's right. There's a hexagonal storm happening on the one of the, I was going to say equator, one of the poles, or is it both the poles of Saturn? Yeah. Oh, Deadman says the rest of the line from Wiki is earlier observations from 1665 to 1713 are believed to be of the same storm. If this is correct, it has existed for at least 360 years. I wonder if that's long enough for some kind of like Lovecraftian alien who's this what's it's to coalesce together in such a place. Makes you wonder. The hexagon. Tesla says the hexagonal storm on Saturn is just the North Pole. See how interesting our own solar system is, and hell, on this show we've even barely scratched the surface. So, player characters, adventure, going after adversaries, and what's in the background? Of course, the environment. You guys know I love using the environment, and the fact is, of course, if player characters, if they aren't synthetic, or even if they are synthetic, the atmosphere itself, wherever they're located, could be very hazardous to probably the majority of synths that exist out there, unless they're like hazardous duty or something. Most biological life can't survive out there unless they're wearing spacesuits. So PCs are in thin membraned protections against the things that are outside. And the fact is that through time, energy, and resources being expended by the PCs to survive in such a location, again, pushing them forward, to do a thing, not giving them 50 years to complete their task, but to say, hey, there's a major storm on the horizon, and yeah, that storm's been in existence for at least 360 years plus before the PCs arrive. Oh yeah, it's your job to go down there and go to some kind of empty habitat that's been there, created by some kind of corporation. Oh, of course it's empty, and yeah, there's some kind of strange signal coming from it, and yeah, the signal came and was cut off, and you've got to go there and recover the MacGuffin before the red storm comes and swallows you up in it, because that's what PCs do, and that's what we as game masters put them in those positions. Yeah. And Rickard posts the false color image basically to get that to to bring out the details of the storm more than the color of the storm. Yeah, a lot of people will do that, even artistically. Yeah, the false color image of the center in a polar vortex does look like something that's trying to summon something Lovecraftian out the middle of it. And even in a number of images we've seen through the topography of like Mars and things, some of those images look like are actual faces. Deadman says, from the wiki on the hexagon storm, developing barotropic instability of Saturn's north polar hexagonal circumpolar jet plus North Pole vortex system produces a long living structure akin to the observed hexagon, which is not the case of the jet-only system, which was studied in this context in a number of papers and literature. Yeah, I see what you did there. I see what you did everywhere. Big ass eye, right? And who's to say the player characters aren't like adventuring in the proverbial eye of Sauron somewhere on some alien planet? Although supposedly, if you go through a Pandora gate in the Eclipse phase setting, you just might be in a place where a big eye is looking at you, and you really don't want it to blink. Now, for our fire element, this is a pretty easy element to deal with, but I'm going to take this a little bit further. Any planetary surface that has volcanic activity going on is going to be a danger to the player characters. Plasma heat, any kind of I'll throw in storms here, although I know that's our air element. Constant electrical storms, ionization, irradiation. Of course, we're going to go towards ourselves some heavy radiation affecting player characters. If the player characters know that they're going to go to a place that's so heavily irradiated that even the best space suit will not protect them from the radiation. And again, player characters, cortical stacks. Okay, need to go on a mission, possibly suicidal. We've got, let's all look at our tabs. We've only got 3 hours and 87, and I don't know, 27 minutes of time before the radiation basically defrags our own DNA. But maybe we can get to the MacGuffin and get it beamed out before our biological bodies die, and then we can beam our consciousness out. Why not play with that? Why not have an adventure where the PCs basically literally are going on a suicide mission? Go down to the planet's surface, you're going to die, period. But it's not the matter of surviving death to do a thing, since death has been recontextualized as a blip on a radar, or just this little speed bump in a parking lot. But the idea is it's like a time run, right? It's a cattle chute. It's run as fast as you can to do the thing before you die. And that may literally just be a one-off for an adventure. Like, yeah, you're gonna die, but if you can get done under 3 hours and get the hell out of there, why not? Yeah. Yeah, Rickard says, we need you to terraform this Caldera on Titan. Yeah, frozen liquid methane landscape. Who knows? Or setting up terraforming equipment itself is probably a dangerous mission. Or sending forth probes that are automated and coming to find out that they go offline, and the PCs are tasked with the very simple act of figuring out why something went offline. But going back to our thermal dangers, talked about cryo dangers and thermal dangers, we also have the idea of technological thermal dangers, right? Exposed radiation cores, blasted plasma out of something that's, blasting out of a giant-sized ramjet that's been activated from gas mining or something. I don't know if this is possible, but I picture gas mining to be like giant-sized ramjets where gas goes in one end and it's refined and the waste product comes out the other end. Could you ignite such a thing to blast out jets that are, 150 kilometers long of plasma heat on the surface of Neptune or something, and the PCs have to go down and turn it off, much like capping an oil rig or something? Sure, I don't know if that's possible or not. We've for those of you that haven't seen the dramatization of Chernobyl and the radiation that was spewing out of the Chernobyl accident, and PCs having to have a running gunfight in such a place. Yeah, I do that. The having a running gunfight on the surface of Mercury inside of a caldera, waiting for the sun to come up. So you're in an airless void that's completely cold, waiting for you to be blasted by the unfiltered radiation and heat in a location without an atmosphere to be melted when the sun finally comes up. That's a great location to have some kind of exotic locale for your player characters to do something, to whatever the mission may be, to get the MacGuffin, to kill the MacGuffin, or whatever the case is. I know I'm using that word MacGuffin, but and I it sounds like I'm being facetious, but I'm not. I'm really saying that using the environment is just another element we can add to the adventures we want our player characters to go on. Ricker says, "Don't worry. Once you're done, we'll set you up with new bodies. No worries. All part of the payment for a successful job." I think that actually sounds like a great idea, right? Hell, you could even do the same thing with player characters being a like colonists or scientists, and the player characters exist as digital information on a spacecraft that has a number of both biological and or synthetic bodies for the player characters to inhabit, and so they can then download themselves into those forms, exploring exotic locations. I think this would be perfect for a gate crashing organization, knowing that maybe they might go to some place where their bodies will be destroyed, but their consciousnesses or even their backups still exist for them to then download themselves into new bodies. But maybe the probes themselves are destroyed by going into the atmosphere or terraforming one of a number of calderas for humanity to live there or something like that. So I think that's a great theme, I suppose. Deadman says there was a story about a fork of an NPC put on the surface of Venus and given the goal of reaching a survivable altitude before the sulfuric acid destroyed the morph. Again, yeah, I mean, if you truly want to figure out like how far deep can you go into, fly down into Jupiter's gaseous outer skin before the gravity pulls you down into that super hard core, or how close can you get to the corona of the sun before you're just blasted into nothingness, right? You could very well do that, send that information back, and then recover from it if you don't suffer too much psychological harm. Yeah. I believe in the Eclipse phase setting, there is like working anywhere near or close to the surface of Venus. I think there are tether cities that do surface mining on Venus. I know Deadman will correct me on this one. And there's the idea that you get hazard pay. So basically, for the most part, most people don't survive the work conditions working anywhere in the atmosphere of Venus, let alone towards the surface, because you've got a poisonous atmosphere at the top part and a molten surface that basically turns lead into liquid pretty instantly on the bottom surface, along with heavy pressure. But if you survive such a thing, you're able to get out of your indentured servitude. So yeah, Rick was like, "Here, have this nuke. Uh, you'll take it to the center of a 500-kilometer firestorm and detonate it, and with luck, the explosion should extinguish the flame." Yeah, a high tech version of a sacrificial goblinoid. Yeah. Pilgrim says, yeah. Oh, Deadman says, as stated in Melt in the Sunward book, the morphs on the surface of Venus um, are manned by forks of indentured servants. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they mention that the morphs on the surface of Venus are made out of um, carbon plating. Basically, they're made out of diamond, and on no other surface that exists in our solar system, they are completely inoperable. But the heat allows the diamond mechanisms to operate in such a harsh environment. I don't know why I pulled that out of my ass, but I'm sure I read it somewhere. So I believe I read it in the first edition of Eclipse Phase. Okay, moving on. Uh, see how I spit out the techno babble? Makes it believable, right? Yeah. uh, the other idea is, yeah, yep. Pet ogre, yeah, puts in a thing where a real individual in our hobby created for himself his own star metal sword. Yeah, what a great idea. Deadman says they are quartz morphs made from quartz because quartz isn't diamond. But yeah, yeah, they're inoperable in any other atmosphere except that one, which is actually a great concept as well. A ton of morphs left on a what a great thematic concept for the players to go somewhere. Hell, even an alien world or something where there are morphs for the players to get inside of, synthetic morphs that were never made by humanity, or at least maybe made by humanity but long forgotten, and they're the only things that are able to survive on this harsh, harsh planetoid or something. Like nothing man-made we know of could exist there, but these morphs like mechas or something like that are left on a planetary surface. Like literally, they can't be pulled out and you can't get to them, but you can beam your consciousness down to them, or maybe even send a probe with your cortical stack and implant them inside of it or whatever to activate them. That'd be kind of a great one-off as well. And what a great bounded location you could do. Now, for our again, that was our fire thermal element, and then for our water element, navigating, like for example, the surface of Titan with acidic lakes and geysers and waterfalls of pure sulfuric acid and such, and the PCs need to navigate such a place while again going after or retrieving or escaping with or stealing the MacGuffin. Really can add a lot of tension into what you're doing. I'm imagining a ton of corporations that are experimenting with dangerous experiments, habitats where there are factions like near cult-like individuals that have gathered together in these dangerous locations to do such a thing. Maybe they feel like they're going to literally program their own AI gods. Maybe they feel like they're going to become a hive creature and essentially bring about their own Lovecraftian horror because they're playing with von Neumann nanotech and strange biologies and such. Or there's a ton of criminal factions out there that have hidden concerns, literally and figuratively, hiding away in massive starships that have bury themselves into ice cliffs and calderic volcanic regions, doing plays, performing acts that everyone else knows is completely illegal, but people look the other way, and the PCs need to ingratiate themselves in those locations, knowing that hell, I could imagine with the indentured servitude, where we were joking about sending people with multi-kiloton nukes to I don't know, unravel the big red storm in on Jupiter's surface, or gaseous surface, or something like that. But in reality, maybe it's far cheaper to send someone spun up consciousness than actually program an AI to do it for them, and to get out of a 187-year indentured servitude, spending 5 years trying to mine the surface of Venus might be a good trade-off, right? And so going on these near suicide missions, knowing that maybe you won't be spun up at the end of it, or maybe you will be, could could really be a thing. Heck, this could even be part of entertainment in this new transhuman world where people are going deeper into the most dangerous regions of our exploration, while also entertaining the populace and bringing back lots of scientific materials. I mean, depending on how cheap it is, of course people are launching probes into our own sun to study solar flares and the corona of the sun and the heliospheres and all that kind of business, knowing that those probes would be destroyed, especially if you can print them out and send them for very little or maybe even no money, right? Um, uh, yeah, Rick talking about making a sword out of blood. Yeah, there is. I think it's. I remember reading something like it takes like so many people to to forge a sword out of the iron of so many dead people, basically their blood or something. Oh man, but heck, who knows what materials we could forge out of um, heat that we cannot create on Earth, gravities we can't create on Earth, and the materials, the alloys that we can't create on Earth, but we could do in space as well. Especially if we have like stellar forges or something like that. Basically, mini suns being used to heat materials that we could never even possibly manipulate here on Earth, but you could do so in either extremely high gravities, maybe even high spin gravities, or zero gravity locations. So yeah, four elements absolutely applicable for science fiction when we're talking about the cyberpunk neo noir setting of Jesus, Altered Carbon, player characters running around neon cities and such. Maybe we want to mix it up a little bit, send them on missions somewhere else inside of new bodies when their cortical stacks get spun up, and you have a one-off adventure where they go off to some place where it's extremely hostile for whatever reason. They arrive, they go on their mission. A spacecraft that landed on an alien world and it's extremely harsh, and we need to retrieve some kind of data, or rescue some of the hostages, or retrieve their stacks before they're gone because they hold some hidden knowledge. And the PCs need to absolutely engage in such a place is very dangerous. Again, I'm going to reinforce, as strangely as it sounds, for game masters and players to understand the fact that part of the element of playing in a transhuman setting is to die, is to have your character killed. Now, again, like Rick pointed out, death isn't really death. It's basically downing your character. Some even relate it to respawning. It's the respawn game. While it's not that simple, your PC can suffer quite a bit of psychological harm due to lack of knowledge. They can survive psychological harm because they remember the manner in which they die through nightmares over and over again if they're able to beam their consciousnesses back. So there are actual mechanical harm being done psychologically and or physically to player characters, but that's part of the game. Hell, if you've watched the first and or second season of the at least here in the States Altered Carbon television show, you'll know that the main character Takashi and a plenty of other people in there pretty much get themselves their biological bodies blasted to nothing quite a bit of time, including self-sacrifice, at least physically, and then having themselves spun up on another body, and that's kind of the best part of it, right? This isn't Dungeons and Dragons, and this isn't technically Shadowrun and or Cyberpunk or any of those games. This is transhuman. These are transhuman settings, especially Altered Carbon and Eclipse phase, and so switching bodies, having your memories altered, really embrace that fact, and I think you can have a lot of fun with that. And then, of course, going to these exotic, dangerous locations just makes it even more poignant to go, yeah, let's go to some place where we're probably going to die pretty soon because we can have a lot of fun there. Um, Ricker says, I would actually advise against the lack of knowledge because it would create weird group dynamics if not all characters go down. I would say that embracing the idea that there are strange and weird dichotomies between player characters having specific knowledge and not having them is part of the game. Although there are some players that will. The point is to find a good group before people become assholes. point of fact, right? Some people just can't help but metagame, and this might not be the setting for them to do such a thing because you would then have to have a character who went on a 3-week mission to do a thing that died to get spun up and pretend like they forgot that knowledge. And there's also not just asshole players, but we have the same on the GM side who, and I warned against this before we get out of here. I warned against this before. GMs, do not, in any sense of the word, tell your players that they've gone into your setting, die, come back, lose their memory, and you say, yeah, you don't get any experience points because you don't remember the thing. Don't do that. Do not do that. Does it make sense that somebody gains experience points and literally doesn't remember anything that they've done? No, it doesn't make sense. But if you want your players to come back again, give them a reward. Experience, I've always said this, experience points don't travel with the character. Those experience points belong to the player. That's their reward for engaging in the game. It so happens that end result, the side effect is their player character improves, but the experience points travel with players. That's their reward for doing it. That's their thank you. That's you giving them a thank you for coming back over and over again and having fun. Yeah, does their player character get better? Sure. But don't be an a-hole and do that. Ricker says a PC dies after 2-3 sessions in, and a few sessions after that, the character comes back. Another PC dies. Do this a few times, and every player is going to have a hard time to keep track of what they know and not know anymore. I kid you not. You could have basically, like you said, 2 or 3 sessions in, and everyone's like, "What the hell's going on?" And everyone just throws their hands up like, whatever, we're going to need to make new player characters. Which is actually pretty easy to do if literally for some unexplained air quote reason, the game master goes, yeah, guess what? All of us, including Game Master, we wipe the entire slate clean and everyone wakes up after 87 years have passed. Great. Okay. That's it. Rickard says, which is why I advise against memory wipe at death. Well, memory wipe at death actually is a thing. I mean, I'm not making it up like narratively. I'm saying that lack, which is the term for lack of memory, is a thing in the game. Now, your advice against it, I see what you're saying, where it would be better if all the players basically all die in the adventure so that they are all on the same page when they get spun back up. But it is a thing in the game where you're not two separate things. One method of saving a player character's memories is that they go on a mission, they die on the mission, and an instant before they die, that is broad. Their entire consciousness is broadcast out of the body that they're in through like a neutrino receiver or a broadcaster, which is available. They do talk about in Eclipse phase, which is possible for the player characters to have on their maybe their firewall agents or whatever the case may be. So yes, you can do that. So you have a continuation of consciousness, and if you as a game master just basically accept the fact that that's how it's done, I don't think any problem with that. The other method is that player character core consciousness is held in a safe haven. A copy is made, complete copy, alpha copy is made. They go on the mission and die, and then they are spun up from a copy, a reserve copy, in which case that copy, I'm sorry, the core and or copy doesn't remember what happened, which is the other method, and that is also possible in the gaming context. And so, but yeah, every group, like Rickard says, makes it much easier to keep track of what they know, what the group knows and doesn't know. And there's a lot of things that is there. There's a lot of things that are in the world of farming is a thing in Forgotten Realms, but you don't expect PCs to do a lot of farming. I hear you, but every group is different. I don't have a problem with it. Like if a game master says I don't remember, my character doesn't remember anything that happened in the last two sessions, it wouldn't bother me. Some other player characters, it would bother the hell out of them. And so, you got to feel out your player character. Some people don't like that. Hell, the simple idea of going on an adventure knowing that your character is going to die, whether they remember it or not, a lot of player characters won't even like that, let alone switching bodies, right? So if you can convince him to do that, I suppose you've gone quite a way before you even start the game. So yeah, it's already complicated enough, and we haven't even like Rickard and I going back and forth. We haven't even gotten to that point. So these games require a heavy session zero before you start rolling dice. Before before the chromatic sheen wipes off the surface and the glitz and glamour of the PCs are like, wow, I can do anything. And then you introduce the whole concept of dying and being spun back up and cortical stacks and all that memory loss and psychological harm. So yeah, heavy session zero is part of this. Yeah. Yep, Deadman says like Sava from Lack in the Eclipse Phase core book. Yeah, when Sava keeps waking up, like it's as if it is a retelling of the same story, and even as a reader, you're not sure whether they are recalling a past event or this new event is happening and they're just waking up yet again, right? Yeah, she hates. Yep, and some characters hate lack. Well, I think humanity would hate lack. Constantly being spun back up, forgetting what happened before, and then asking the exact same questions over and over again. And the medical people that are waking you up are like rolling their eyes, like, really? This is the 37th time you've asked me the same thing. Yeah, Ricker says, I mean, I like the concept of memory wipes on death, but it's just easier on the players and the DM to skip it, unless you can make sure all PCs die. I absolutely agree with that. Or, and of course, narratively, you can easily explain it. Hey, your PC died on this mission, but we have copies of everything they've gone through. Here's the copy. Spin back up, add to add it to your core, a root, data core or something, cortical stack. That's another way of doing it. A third way would be for, yeah, yeah. What's the date? In Altered Carbon, remember where Takashi begs for a mirror to keep his consciousness stable because of the constant lack, basically, that he suffers from. In the show, they kind of narratively hint at it, where he scrambles for some kind of reflective surface to keep his consciousness settled, because he's been his cortical stack has been re-upped so often, over and over and over again. And I suppose you could even have a pre-mission where the PCs need to recover their own lost cortical stacks to recover their memories to start the mission in the first place. I could imagine that being the beginning of an adventure. PCs go into empty habitat or something. All PCs standing around their blasted dead bodies. They reach into their dead skulls to pick up their own cortical stacks, to then insert them into a machine. Ooh, kitty. To insert them into a machine so that they can recover the information that they themselves went on the failed suicide mission in the first place. Or maybe they were killed. Hell, a noir adventure. Player characters go to dangerous alien world. They arrive at a dangerous alien world, go to a settlement on dangerous alien world, find their own dead body with through a beacon, grab their own cortical stack from their own dead body, insert it into a machine. Their eyes flicker in the back of their head a couple of seconds, and then retrieve the information to figure out what the hell just happened here. Right? I think that perfectly fits as well. I mean, the game is supposed to fit our setting, and I do agree with you, Rickard. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm coming at it from a different angle as options. And yes, just describing what lack is problem enough. I suppose if you've got 4 players and trying to coordinate what people remember or don't remember, and a DM describing to players what they do remember and don't remember, like, oh, I keep forgetting that you don't remember the NPC you met 3 sessions ago, but you had an intimate relationship with them, and that can get real complicated, right? So anyway, Calderas. We're coming to the end here. Sorry about that, guys. The use of calderas, I think, is a great way to add some kind of elemental effect into the game. Essentially, basically use your base 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. Take them, turn the volume up on those as high as you like, and then really put that danger in the background for the player characters, despite the fact that if you're doing anything interstellar, there's always the dangers of radiation, vacuum, gravity, plasma, razor sharp things, anything that pierces the skin of a habitat, the skin of a mecha, the skin of a vehicle, the skin of a spacesuit is going to be a danger. Extreme temperatures are very common, and just using those things. And I think calderas just lend itself to using all of those interchangeably, one after another. You know me, escalating, random, static events, stimulated events, all those things really work for an environment. So guys, everybody have a great one. I'm going to hang out in the Discord for just a little bit, but you guys have a great one. Thank you for joining me on this Future Friday, and I will see you next Future Friday, same time, same place. Have a great one. Please like, share, subscribe, follow over on Twitch, comment below, become a subscriber. Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.